A pastor and state lawmaker says it's time to rekindle the spirit of the black-robed regiment.
We're losing our liberties now at an exponential rate. So what may have taken 100 years to strip away a few liberties, now we're losing those liberties, my goodness, maybe almost on a monthly, weekly basis, and certainly on a yearly basis. So yes, we're in danger of losing them.
State Representative Dan Fisher isn't shy when talking politics as a member of the Oklahoma legislature. He also has no qualms about mixing religion, morality, and politics from the pulpit at his 1,000-member Trinity Baptist Church in Yukon, Oklahoma.
Unfortunately, today, things that we're calling political are actually moral issues. Things like same-sex marriage, the murder of the unborn through abortion. Those things are not political issues, they're moral issues. So I think a pastor can attack all of these issues and never mention a campaign or a political party.
The Republican lawmaker says he's following the example of ministers during our nation's colonial years who spoke out against British rule. This black-robed regiment of pastors put aside their clerical garb in favor of uniforms and weapons, leading the men in their congregations into battle during America's war for independence.
When the time came that tyranny was too much, the pastors not only spoke out, they led out, and recruited the men of their churches and led them off to fight for liberty. Now, certainly no one's calling for armed conflict, but what we do need in the pulpit today is that spirit of the black-robed regiment.
The Reverend Fisher travels around the country to promote the idea of rebuilding the black-robed regiment, not to take up arms, but to defend what he says are the values, liberties, and religious freedom that our founding fathers fought and died for.
The 18th century church considered the separation of religion, civil and religious liberties as a sin. They considered it ungodly. Of course, today we've turned that on its head, and we consider the mixing of the two ungodly. In fact, I'm convinced that if it hadn't been for the church and for the pastors, there probably would not be an America that we call America today.
Wearing a wig, hat, and colonial-style uniform, Pastor Fisher frequently portrays the Reverend John Muhlenberg. During a sermon in 1776, the Lutheran minister shed his black robe to reveal a colonial officer's uniform and successfully challenged the men in his congregation in Woodstock, Virginia, to join him in the fight for liberty. Dan Fisher relates that effort to today's culture war.
You see, there comes a time when liberty must be defended. Because if we lose our external liberties, friends, we'll lose our internal ability to believe and preach and practice what the Bible says.
But is there a price to pay for today's pastors who engage in the culture war from the pulpit? The Reverend Fisher spoke with IllinoisFamily.org News after a recent black-robed regiment presentation in Springfield hosted by the Illinois Family Institute.
A number of us pastors have gotten into the pulpits. The numbers have grown from 33 nationwide to over 1,600 who are officially a part of this. The IRS unofficially admitted last year that they really don't have the authority to tell pastors what they can preach. Really, the truth is there is no danger. Now, if we remain silent and they continue to encroach upon our liberties, I assure you there will come a time when the IRS, like they've been doing the 501c3 groups, will begin to come down on churches, but that will only be because we allowed it.
And there's a double standard.
We've allowed the progressive, more liberal churches to be very politically engaged, outspoken, and notice what does the IRS do? Nothing. So the conservative churches need to say, oh, well, if that's the way the game is played, we can do that too.
Pastor Dan Fisher says the Black-Robed Regiment movement is a resource and networking entity where church leaders and lay people can become involved in the effort to stand up for Christ and to protect the freedoms and liberties in the U.S. Constitution that he and others claim are divinely inspired.
I do believe that there are some positive signs. Pastors are beginning to get it. Maybe it's not the majority, but it could be that God is not going to use the majority. During our War of Independence, less than a third of the Americans actually stood for liberty and fought Great Britain. It was a minority then. God could use that same thing. But in the end, we all know that it's going to take a supernatural move of God. We're going to have to see God put his hand back upon our states and our churches, and we've been silent. And we ought to take the lesson of Israel, that's what happened to them, and the church in World War II Germany. Same thing happened there. It's time that we speak out. But I do believe, yes, I believe there's hope.
The Illinois Family Institute is bringing Pastor Fisher and his Black-Robed Regiment multimedia presentation presentation to several locations throughout the state. Click on to the events section of the IFI website. For IllinoisFamily.org News, I'm Monty Larrick.
This has been brought to you by the Illinois Family Institute, promoting marriage, family, life, and liberty in the land of Lincoln. For more information, go to illinoisfamily.org.